The eviction notice trembled in Elena's calloused hands as she read it for the third time, hoping the words would somehow change. 30 days. After 4 generations of her family working this land, they had 30 days before the bank would. Seize everything, Mama. What's that paper? 7-year-old Sophia's voice cut through Elena's racing thoughts. Her daughter stood in the doorway of their small kitchen, school backpack still strapped to her shoulders, wide with the intuition children possess when they sense their world shifting. Nothing, Mia, just grown-up papers. Lena folded the notice quickly, tucking it beneath a stack of unpaid bills. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but Sophia had already lost too much. First her father to the war overseas, then their savings to his medical bills, and now this. The sound of tires on gravel made Elena's stomach clench, or bad news probably. Through the window, she watched a sleek black car pull up to their weathered farmhouse, so out of place among the rust-stained pickup trucks and farming equipment that it might as well have been a spaceship. A man stepped out, and Elena's breath caught. Even from a distance, everything about him screamed money. His suit probably cost more than Elena made in 6 months. His shoes gleamed despite the dust. When he walked, it was with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. She opened the door before he could knock, crossing her arms defensively across her chest. "We're not interested in whatever you're selling, Mrs. Elena Vasquez." His voice was smooth, cultured. "My name is Marcus Ashford. I represent Ashford Development Corporation." The name hit her like ice water. She'd heard whispers about Ashford Corporation buying up struggling farms throughout the valley, turning them into shopping centers and housing developments. Communities that had existed for generations, erased for profit. "I'm not selling." Marcus smiled, and it was the kind, a smile that never reached the eyes. "I think you'll want to hear my offer first." "May I come in?" Against her better judgment, Elena stepped aside. Sophia peeked around the corner, curious about their unexpected visitor. Marcus noticed her immediately, his businessman's mask slipping slightly as he took in the little girl's patched jeans and 2 small sneakers. "Beautiful daughter," he said, and Elena couldn't tell if he meant it or if this was part of his strategy. "Sophia, go play in your room," Elena instructed, but Sophia lingered, sensing the tension crackling between the adults. Marcus settled into their worn sofa without invitation, pulling out a leather folder. "I'll cut straight to the point, Mrs. Vasquez. I know about the foreclosure notice. I know you're 3 months behind on your mortgage, and I know the bank won't extend your loan again." Lena's cheeks burned with shame and anger. How dare this stranger know her private struggles, her failures as a mother and provider? "Prepared to offer you $200,000 for your property, cash. You could pay off the mortgage and have money left over to start fresh somewhere else. Give your daughter the opportunities she deserves." A number hung in the air between them, impossibly large. Lena had never seen that much money in one place. It would solve everything. Pay the debts, secure Sophia's future, maybe even send her to college someday. But it would also mean leaving the only home Sophia had ever known. The garden where Elena's grandmother had taught her to grow tomatoes. The oak tree where her husband had carved their initials on their wedding day. Graves of 3 generations of her family in the small cemetery beyond the fields. "This is our home," Elena said quietly. "Sentiment doesn't pay mortgages," Marcus replied. Not unkindly, but with the brutal honesty of someone who dealt in facts and figures. "Your home will be gone in 30 days, regardless. At least this way, you get something for it." He was right. And they both knew it. Elena looked around their small living room, taking in the hand-me-down furniture, the family photos on the mantel, and Sophia's drawings taped to the refrigerator. All of it would disappear whether she took his offer or not. "I need time to think." Marcus nodded, standing smoothly. "Of course." "But Mrs. Vasquez, opportunities like this don't wait forever. The development project moves forward with or without your cooperation. The difference is whether your family benefits from it." After he left, Elena sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the business card he'd placed on the table. Sophia emerged from her room, climbing into Elena's lap with the unconscious trust of a child who believed her mother could fix anything. "Who was that man, Mama?" Elena stroked her daughter's dark hair, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and playground dirt. How could she explain that sometimes loving someone meant making choices that felt like betrayal? That sometimes there was no good option, only degrees of loss? Someone who wants to help us, Alina whispered. And this time she wasn't sure if it was a lie or the hardest truth she'd ever spoken. Alina couldn't sleep. She stood in the moonlit kitchen at 3 a.m, hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee, staring out at the land that had shaped her entire life. The cornstalk swayed in the night breeze, whispering secrets her great-grandmother had taught her to hear. 27 days left. The business card lay on the table where Marcus had left it, seeming to glow in the darkness. $200,000. The number had echoed in her mind all evening, growing larger and more tempting with each passing hour. She thought about Sophia's school shoes, held together with duct tape and hope, about the medical bills still, arriving months after her husband's funeral, about the look in her daughter's eyes when other children talked about family vacations and new bicycles, and all the things they took for granted. A soft knock at the door made her jump. Through the window, she saw Maria Santos, her neighbor and closest friend, holding a covered dish. Even at this ungodly hour, Maria's presence felt like a lifeline. "I saw your light on," Maria said when Alina opened the door. "Figured you might need some company." They sat together in comfortable silence, sharing the enchiladas Maria had brought. It was Maria who finally spoke the words Alina had been afraid to think. "You're going to take his offer, aren't you?" Elena's throat tightened. "How did you know?" "'Cause I would. Because any mother would." Maria reached across the table, covering Elena's hand with her own weathered fingers. "There's no shame in choosing your child's future over the past. This land has been in my family for 90 years. My great-grandmother cleared these fields with her bare hands after she fled the revolution. How can I just give it away to some corporation that sees dollar signs instead of history? Your great-grandmother would understand. She came here for the same reason you're considering leaving, to give her children a better life." Lena wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I keep thinking about what Miguel would say. He loved this place so much. We're going to expand the farm, maybe start selling at the farmer market in town. He had so many plans. Miguel would want Sofia to have choices he never had. You know that?" The truth in Maria's words hit harder than any argument Marcus could have made. Alina thought about her husband's final months, how he'd worried more about their future than his own failing health, how he'd made her promise to do whatever it took to give Sofia opportunities they'd never had. But what about everyone else? "This isn't just about our family. Bashford Corporation gets our land, they'll come for yours next, for the Martinez place. For old Roberto's orchard, they'll turn this whole valley into strip malls and parking lots." Maria was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe. Or maybe they'll bring jobs. My grandson graduated from high school last year. He's working at the gas station for minimum wage, because there's nothing else here for young people. Sometimes change isn't the enemy we think it is." Alina wanted to argue, but she couldn't ignore the truth in Maria's words. The valley was dying slowly, one foreclosed farm at a time. The young people left for the cities and never came back. The old ways of life that had sustained their families for generations weren't enough anymore. "I need to see the property myself," Alina said suddenly. "Walk the land one more time before I make this decision." They left Sofia sleeping and walked out into the pre-dawn darkness. The familiar path through the fields felt different now, heavy with the weight of goodbye. Alina found herself memorizing details she'd taken for granted. The way the irrigation ditches caught the starlight, the sound of their footsteps on the packed earth, the smell of growing things in rich soil. They reached the highest point on the property, just as the sun began to rise, painting the valley in shades of gold and pink. From here, Alina could see the entire world she was considering leaving behind. Her small farmhouse in the distance, Maria's properties next door, the winding road that led to town, the mountains that had stood guard over her family for 4 generations. "It's beautiful," Maria whispered. "It was." Elena's voice broke on the words. "It was beautiful when there were families in every house, when the fields were full of crops instead of weeds, when children played in these hills instead of spending their days dreaming of escape." She pulled out her phone, finding Marcus's number before she could lose her nerve. The sun climbed higher as she waited for him to answer, transforming the valley from mysterious shadow to harsh reality. She could see the broken fence posts, the irrigation system that needed repairs she couldn't afford, the fields that lay fallow because she didn't have money for seeds. Mrs. Vasquez, Marcus's voice was crisp despite the early hour. I was hoping you'd call. I have conditions, Alina said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. I want $300,000, and I want a guarantee that you'll hire locally for the construction jobs. People from this valley, not outsiders. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Vasquez, I appreciate your position, but $200,000 is already a generous offer for property of this size and condition. This property has access to the main highway, natural water rights, and the best soil in the county. You know it's worth more than what you're offering. Alina had done her research in the sleepless hours before dawn. And if you want a smooth development process without legal challenges or community protests, you need local support. Hiring local workers is the first step. Another pause. Alina held her breath, aware that she was gambling with her daughter's future. $250, and I'll consider local hiring preferences. $300, guaranteed local hiring for at least 60% of construction positions. We give the families in this valley opportunity to buy homes in whatever you build. Here, no outside investors for the first 6 months. You drive a hard bargain, Mrs. Vasquez. I learned from the best. My great-grandmother didn't survive a revolution by being a pushover. Marcus laughed, and for the first time, it sounded genuine. $300,000, 60% local hiring. Local families, ghetto first opportunity on home purchases. Do we have a deal? Alina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 4 generations settling on her shoulders. We have a deal. She hung up the phone. Maria squeezed her hand. You did the right thing. Alina wasn't sure what the right thing in this situation. But she had done the necessary thing, the thing that would give Sophia a chance at the life Alina had always dreamed of providing. Sometimes that had to be enough. The signing was supposed to be a formality. Alina sat in the gleaming conference room of Marcus's law office, surrounded by more marble and mahogany than she'd seen in her entire life. Sophia fidgeted beside her, uncomfortable in the only dress that still fit her properly, whispering questions about the tall buildings visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Marcus appeared different here in his own territory, more polished, more distant. The man who had shown flashes of genuine humanity at her kitchen table was replaced by a corporate executive who spoke in legal terms and avoided eye contact. Before we proceed, Marcus said, spreading documents across the conference table. There's something I need to discuss with you. Elena's stomach dropped. In her experience, nothing good ever followed those words. The development project has evolved. Since our initial conversation, the scope is now significantly larger than originally planned. Marcus pulled out a map Alina didn't recognize. Where her property had been marked as a small section of a modest development, she now saw her land as the centerpiece of something massive. I don't understand, Alina said, studying the blueprint. This shows development extending far beyond my property. Into the Santos land, the Martinez farm, even old Roberto's orchard. The project has attracted additional investors. What started as a small residential development is now planned as a major commercial and entertainment complex. Shopping centers, restaurants, a hotel, possibly even a casino. The words hit Alina like physical blows. You lied to me. You said this would be a small development, homes for local families. I said the homes would be available to local families. First, that's still true? But Mrs. Vasquez, you have to understand business realities. Projects of this magnitude don't happen overnight. Plans evolve. Sophia tugged on Elena's sleeve. Mama, what's wrong? Why do you look scared? Alina pulled her daughter closer, mind racing. What about my neighbors? Maria, the Martinez family, Roberto? Are you planning to force them out too? Marcus's expression hardened. I'm offering them the same opportunity I offered you. Fair market value for their properties. If they choose not to accept, that's their decision. Fair market value determined by you after you've made it impossible for them to keep their farms profitable. Lena stood abruptly, papers scattering. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You're not developing this area, you're destroying it. I'm bringing economic growth to a region that desperately needs it. Do you know the unemployment rate in this county? The number of young people who leave every year is due to a lack of opportunities. This development will create thousands of jobs. Minimum wage service jobs that won't pay enough for people to afford the homes you're building on their family land. The argument was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Alina heard raised voices, one of which sounded familiar. The conference room door burst open, and Maria Santos stormed in, her face flushed with anger. Alina, thank God you're here. Did you know about this? Maria thrust a legal document at her. They're claiming eminent domain on my property, saying my land is necessary for their road access. Elena's blood turned to ice. Eminent domain? Marcus, you said my neighbors would have a choice? The county has determined that certain properties are essential for the infrastructure required by the development. It's out of my hands, like hell it is. Maria's voice shook with fury. I've lived on that land for 37 years. I've raised 4 children there. My husband is buried in that cemetery behind our house, and you want to put a parking lot over his grave for your shopping mall? Sophia pressed closer to Alina, frightened by the adult anger filling the room. Alina felt the walls closing in around her. She had made a deal with the devil, and now everyone she cared about would pay. The price? I can't sign this, Alina said, pushing the contracts away. Not if it means destroying my community. Marcus's mask finally slipped completely. Mrs. Vasquez, you have a legally binding verbal agreement. If you refuse to sign, I'll sue you for breach of contract, and I'll win. Then sue me. Alina gathered. Sophia in her arms, surprised by her own certainty. I'd rather lose everything fighting than gain anything by betraying the people I love. Think about your daughter, Marcus said coldly. Think about her future. You're choosing sentiment over her security. The words were designed to wound, and they found their mark. Lena felt the weight of every unpaid bill, every sacrifice she'd made every night she'd lain awake, worrying about Sophia's future. But she also felt something else, something stronger than fear. I am thinking about her future, Elena said quietly. I'm thinking about the kind of woman I want her to become, the kind of world I want to leave her. And that world doesn't include selling out her community for money. She started toward the door, but Marcus's voice stopped her. Wait. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, and for a moment he looked younger, less certain. If there was another way, Lena turned back, hope and suspicion warring in her chest. What if the development could be modified? Smaller scale, more community-focused. What if we could find a solution that preserves what matters to you while still moving forward? Why would you do that? Alina asked. You have the legal power to take what you want. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving between Alina and Sophia. Because my daughter asked me something yesterday that I couldn't answer. She wanted to know why I was so proud of tearing down someone's home. I told her it was business, but she's 8 years old. She doesn't understand why business has to hurt people. Alina saw something in Marcus's face she hadn't expected. Doubt, regret, maybe even shame. I have a daughter too, she said softly. That's why I can't let you destroy this valley. Not for any amount of money. Maria stepped forward. What kind of solution are you talking about? Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. There's someone you should meet. Someone who might have ideas about how to develop rural communities without destroying them. Her name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and she specializes in sustainable community development. Alina felt a flicker of something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. But I have conditions, Marcus continued. We meet on neutral ground. No lawyers, no contracts, just people trying to solve a problem. And Mrs. Vasquez, you agree to keep the current deal on the table as a backup plan. If we can't find a solution that works for everyone, you honor your original commitment. Alina looked at Maria, then down at Sophia, who was watching the adults. With wide, trusting eyes, her daughter believed Alina could fix anything, could find a way to make everything work out. Maybe it was time to prove her right. Okay, Alina said. But we do this in the valley, my land. If you want to understand what you're asking us to give up, you need to see it through our eyes. Marcus nodded slowly. I'll make the call. Dr. Sarah Chen arrived at Elena's farm in a dust-covered jeep, looking nothing like the academic Elena had expected. She was young, maybe early 30s, with calloused hands and soil under her fingernails. Her introduction came not with business, cards or PowerPoint presentations, but with a request to walk the land. "I need to understand the ecosystem before I can suggest anything," Sarah explained as they gathered in Elena's kitchen. "Not just the environmental ecosystem, but the human. One, who lives here, how they make their living, what connects them to this place." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Dr. Chen, with respect, we have deadlines. The investors are expecting progress reports, and the county has already approved the initial development permits. Mr. Ashford, you called me because your current approach isn't working. If you want a different outcome, you need a different process." Sarah's voice was patient but firm. "How long has your family lived here, Mrs. Vasquez?" "For generations," Elena replied. "My great-grandmother bought this land in 1934 with money she saved working in the fields. She was 19 years old and spoke maybe 10 words of English. They spent the morning touring the valley." Sarah asked endless questions, photographed everything, and took notes in a battered journal. She talked to Maria about her vegetable garden, learned about Roberto's apple trees, and listened to stories about families who had lived and worked this land for decades. But it was Sophia who captured Sarah's attention. Elena's daughter had attached herself to the newcomer, chattering about the animals, the secret fort she'd built in the old oak tree, and the swimming hole where her father had taught her to float. "This is where Papa proposed to Mama," Sophia announced, leading them to a weathered wooden bridge over the creek. "He said this was the most beautiful place in the world." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Miguel had been so young then, so full of dreams about the life they would build together. He never could have imagined his wife would one day consider selling their dreams to strangers. Sarah knelt beside Sophia. "What's your favorite thing about living here?" Sophia considered the question seriously. "The quiet. In town, there are always cars and sirens and people yelling. But here, you can hear the birds and the wind and the cows talking to each other. And at night, you can see all the stars." When they returned to the farmhouse, Sarah spread out large sheets of paper on Elena's kitchen table and began sketching. "What if we approached this differently?" she said, drawing quick diagrams. "Instead of traditional development that replaces the existing community, what if we enhanced it?" Marcus leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "What do you mean?" "Agritourism. Farm-to-table restaurants. A working farm that people can visit and learn from. Preserve the agricultural character while creating sustainable economic opportunities." Sarah's pencil moved quickly across the paper. "Mrs. Vasquez keeps her land and her farming operation. We build around it, not over it." Lena felt her heart beat faster. People would want to visit a working farm. People are hungry for authentic experiences. They want to know where their food comes from and want their children to understand. That milk doesn't just come from cartons. Sarah turned to Marcus. "The profit margins might be lower than your original plan, but the investment is also much smaller. And the community support would be enormous. The investors are expecting a certain return," Marcus said slowly. "Shopping centers and hotels generate more revenue than farm tours. In the short term, yes. But sustainable tourism creates long-term value. Mrs. Vasquez is right about the community benefits. Local hiring, local sourcing, preserving the cultural heritage of the area." Sarah pulled out her tablet, showing them photos from similar projects. "This is a farm in Virginia that added a visitor center and farm-table restaurant. Their annual revenue increased by 300% in 3 years." Elena studied the images, seeing possibilities she'd never imagined. "But what about my neighbors? This still doesn't solve the problem of eminent domain." "Actually, it does." Sarah drew connecting lines between the properties on her sketch. "If Maria's property becomes part of the agricultural tourism network, if Roberto's orchard becomes a destination for apple picking and cider tasting, if the Martinez family can sell their produce directly to visitors, then everyone benefits. No one has to lose their land." Maria had been quiet throughout the presentation, but now she spoke up. "How do we know this isn't just another way for outsiders to profit from our work?" It was a fair question, one that cut to the heart of Elena's fears. Sarah met Maria's eyes directly. Because you would be partners, not employees. The development would be structured as a cooperative. Everyone who contributes land or resources gets a share of the profits. Marcus frowned. That's not how development typically works. No, it's not. But it's how sustainable community development works. And it's how you build something that lasts, instead of something that extracts wealth and leaves nothing behind. Elena felt something shifting inside her chest, a cautious optimism she hadn't experienced in months. What would this mean for Sophia? For her future? It means she could choose to stay here and still have opportunities. College internships in sustainable agriculture, business management, and hospitality. Or she could choose to leave and know that her home would still be here when she's ready to return. Sarah smiled at Sophia, who was listening intently, despite probably understanding only half of what the adults were discussing. And what about the investors? Elena asked Marcus. Will they accept lower profits? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at Sarah's sketches. I don't know, he admitted. Some of them might walk away, but others might be interested in this kind of project. Sustainable development is becoming more attractive to certain types of investors. There's something else, Sarah added. A project like this would qualify for state and federal grants, rural development funding, agricultural preservation money, and sustainable tourism incentives. The initial investment might be lower than you think. Elena looked around her kitchen table, seeing the future spread out in Sarah's drawings. It wasn't the future she had originally imagined, and it wasn't the future Marcus had planned, but it was a future where Sophia could grow up proud of her heritage instead of ashamed of it, where Elena could honor her husband's memory while still building something new. I want to try, Elena said suddenly. I want to present this to the community and see what people think. Marcus nodded slowly. I'll need to talk to the investors. And the county will have to approve modified development plans. But Mrs. Vasquez, I think this could work. Sophia, who had been coloring quietly in the corner, looked up at the adults. Does this mean we don't have to move away? Lena knelt beside her daughter, seeing hope and trust in those dark eyes. It means we're going to try very hard to stay. But even if we can't make this work, we're going to make sure any choice we make is the right one for our family and our friends. Sophia nodded solemnly, then returned to her coloring. She was drawing their farmhouse, Elena realized, but with additions. More buildings, more people, more life. Her daughter was already imagining a future Elena was just beginning to believe might be possible. That evening, after Marcus and Sarah had left to begin making phone calls and drawing up preliminary plans, Elena sat on her front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Maria joined her, bringing 2 cups of coffee and the comfortable silence of old friendship. Do you think it will work? Maria asked. I don't know, Elena admitted. But for the first time in months, I feel like we're fighting for something instead of just fighting against something. And that feels like hope. In the distance, Sophia's laughter carried on the evening breeze as she played with the barn cats. The sound was pure joy, untainted by the adult worries that had consumed Elena for so long. Whatever happened next, Elena was determined to preserve that laughter, that sense of home and belonging that no amount of money could truly replace. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. 6 months later, Elena stood in the same kitchen where Marcus had first made his offer, but everything had changed. Through the window, she could see construction workers putting the finishing touches on the visitor center, its rustic design blending seamlessly with the existing farmhouse. Local workers, just as she had demanded, heralded by Roberto's eldest son, who had returned from the city to manage the construction project. The morning air carried the sound of hammers and laughter. The voices of neighbors working together to build something none of them could have created alone. The Martinez family was installing solar panels on their new greenhouse. While Maria tested recipes in the commercial kitchen they had built behind her house, Sophia burst through the door, breathless with excitement. Mama, the first tour bus is coming up the road. Elena's stomach fluttered with nervous energy. After months of planning, construction, and preparation, today marked the official opening of Valverde Agricultural Cooperative. The name had been Sophia's suggestion, and it had stuck. Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking remarkably different from the polished executive who had first visited 6 months ago. His expensive suits had been replaced by jeans and work boots. His hands were dirty from helping Roberto repair a fence that morning. Most surprisingly, his daughter Emma was with him, an 8-year-old girl with her father's dark hair and her mother's bright smile. "Ready for this?" Marcus asked Elena. "As ready as we'll ever be." Elena smoothed her apron, a gesture that had become habit when she was nervous. She wore the same clothes she always had for farm work, but today they felt like a uniform she was proud to wear. The transformation of Marcus had been as dramatic as the transformation of the land. The night after Sarah's presentation, he had called Elena with unexpected news. 3 of his major investors had withdrawn from the project, calling the agricultural cooperative too risky and insufficiently profitable, instead of being discouraged. Marcus had used his own money to move forward, restructuring the entire venture as a social impact investment. "My ex-wife was right about one thing," he had told Elena during one of their planning meetings. "I had lost sight of why I started building things in the first place. It was supposed to be about creating something meaningful, not just maximizing returns." The tour bus pulled up to the new parking area, and Elena watched 25 visitors step out, their faces bright with curiosity. Urban families with children, retired couples with cameras, college students with notebooks. Sarah had been right about the hunger for authentic experiences. Elena walked out to greet them, her initial nervousness fading as she began to talk about something she loved. She led them through the vegetable gardens where Maria grew heirloom tomatoes and peppers, past the orchard where Roberto explained the difference between ancient apple varieties, and into the barn where Sophia demonstrated how to milk a cow. "My great-grandmother started this farm with nothing but determination and hope," Elena told the group as they gathered under the old oak tree. "She believed that if you took care of the land, it would take care of you." We're still proving her right. During lunch at Maria's farm-to-table restaurant, Elena overheard conversations that made her heart swell. A mother from the city explaining to her son why fresh milk tastes different from store-bought. A teenager asking Roberto detailed questions about organic farming techniques. A young couple inquiring about the possibility of buying one of the small houses that would be built on the edge of the property for people to live in the agricultural community. After the tour bus departed, the families gathered in Elena's backyard for their weekly cooperative meeting. These gatherings had become Elena's favorite part of the new venture. Neighbors who had once struggled in isolation now planned together, solved problems together, and celebrated successes together. "The online orders are up 30% from last month," Maria reported, consulting her tablet with the same ease she once used to can vegetables. "The preserves and pickled vegetables are especially popular, and the weekend farm dinners are booked solid through the fall," added Carlos Martinez, who had discovered a talent for event planning that surprised everyone, including himself. Marcus pulled out his own notebook, a far cry from the expensive leather folder he had once carried. "The investor reports are overwhelmingly positive. We're on track to be profitable by year 2, which is actually faster than most traditional developments. But the real measure of success wasn't in the financial reports. It was in Sophia's face, as she played with Emma and the other children who now visited regularly. It was in the sound of multiple languages spoken by workers who had found good jobs close to home. It was in the cemetery behind the farmhouse, where Miguel's grave was now surrounded by wildflowers that tourists photographed but would never disturb. As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors, Elena remembered from childhood, she found herself alone with Marcus on the front porch. Emma and Sophia were inside, working on a school project about sustainable agriculture, their voices carrying through the open windows. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked. "Walking away from the bigger profits, the traditional development?" Was quiet for a moment, watching his daughter help Sophia with her homework. "I regret a lot of things," he said finally. "I regret the years I spent building things that didn't matter, the communities I disrupted for profit, the relationship with my daughter that I nearly destroyed because I thought providing money was the same as providing love. But this, he gestured toward the thriving farm around them. This is the first thing I've built that I'm actually proud of. Lena nodded, understanding the weight of that admission. Miguel would have loved this, she said softly. Always believed that the best solutions were the ones that helped everyone. Your husband sounds like he was a wise man. He was. I also would have laughed at the idea of me giving business advice to a millionaire developer. Alina smiled at the memory. He used to say I was too stubborn for my own good. Turns out that stubborn streak was exactly what we needed. A year later, Alina received a call that would have once filled her with dread. It was from another developer, interested in buying the Rodriguez farm on the other side of the county. But instead of hanging up immediately, Alina listened to the pitch, then offered a counterproposal. What if I told you there was a better way, she said, using words that had once been spoken to her. What if instead of destroying a community, you could help it thrive? 3 months later, Alina found herself standing in another family's kitchen, this time as the expert consultant. Sarah had officially partnered with her to replicate the Valle Verde model across rural communities throughout the region. Transformation from struggling farmer to community development specialist still amazed her. But Marcus reminded her that she had always possessed the skills. She had just needed the opportunity to use them. The Valle Verde Agricultural Cooperative had become a case study taught in business schools, a model visited by delegations from other countries, and most importantly, a home where for generations of dreams had finally found sustainable footing. On Sophia's 9th birthday, the entire community gathered for a celebration that spilled from Elena's backyard into the surrounding fields. Children ran between the picnic tables, while adults shared stories and laughter. Marcus and his daughter Emma had become permanent fixtures, with Marcus eventually buying a small house on the edge of the property. The corporate shark had evolved into a community member who coached the local youth soccer team and taught business skills to teenage entrepreneurs. As Alina watched Sophia blow out her candles, surrounded by friends both old and new, she felt Miguel's presence as strongly as if he were standing beside her. They had given their daughter something precious, roots and wings, tradition and possibility, a community that would support her whether she chose to stay or to soar. The cake was Maria's recipe, made with apples from Roberto's orchard and eggs from Elena's chickens. The candles were lit by Emma, Sophia's best friend and co-conspirator in adventures that spanned both their worlds. The song was sung in 3 languages by voices that had learned to harmonize despite their differences. Later that evening, after the last guests had departed and the dishes were washed, Alina sat on her porch swing with Sophia curled against her side. The stars were brilliant. Overhead, unpolluted by city lights, just as Sophia had described to Sarah that first day. "Mama," Sophia said sleepily, "do you think Papa knows about everything that happened?" Elena pressed a kiss to her daughter's hair, breathing in the scent of childhood and possibility. "I think he knows, Mia, and I think he's proud of how brave you were when everything seemed impossible." "Were you scared?" Sophia asked, "when that man first came here?" Lena considered the question honestly. "I was terrified. But sometimes being scared just means you care enough about something to fight for it. Fear can make you stronger if you don't let it make you smaller." Sophia nodded against Elena's shoulder, processing this wisdom with the gravity children bring. 2 important truths. "I'm glad we stayed," she whispered. "Me too, baby. Me too." As Elena rocked her daughter in the gentle evening breeze, she thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The desperation that had nearly driven her to abandon everything she valued. The unexpected alliance with a man who had seemed like an enemy. The community had rallied together to create something beautiful from the ashes of their individual struggles. The farm around them hummed with quiet prosperity. Solar panels gleamed on the barn roof. The visitor center displayed awards for sustainable tourism and community development. The restaurant's herb garden released fragrances that drew visitors from around the world to taste authenticity they couldn't find anywhere else. But more than the success, more than the financial security, more than the recognition, Alina treasured the simple truth that Sophia would grow up proud of her heritage instead of ashamed of it. That the stories of 4 generations of women who had loved this land would continue through her daughter. Whether Sophia chose to farm or to become a doctor, To stay local or to travel the world, the American dream had not looked the way Alina had expected. It had not come through abandoning the past, but through honoring it while building something new. It had not required choosing between roots and growth, but finding the wisdom to nurture both. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new visitors eager to experience the magic of Vala Verde. But tonight, Alina simply held her daughter under the vast star-filled sky, feeling the deep contentment that comes from knowing you have built something that will outlast you, something that honors both the past and the future. Something that proves love and stubborn determination can transform even the most impossible circumstances into unexpected gifts. The land her great-grandmother had claimed with courage and hope now sustained not just Elena's family, but an entire community of dreamers who had learned that the best solutions often emerge when people choose cooperation over competition, when they build bridges instead of walls, when they remember that everyone's story matters and everyone's home deserves protection. In the distance, a night bird called across the fields, its voice carrying the ancient song of a place where people had always found ways to make the impossible possible, where families had always believed that tomorrow could be better than today, where the earth itself held memories of every generation that had loved it well. Alina closed her eyes and listened to that song, knowing that her great-grandmother had heard the same call across these same fields 90 years ago, knowing that Sophia would hear it 30 years from now, knowing that some things were worth more than money, worth more than convenience, worth more than any developer's grand plans, worth everything, in fact. Asterisk the end. Asterisk, asterisk. Like this video, if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales, and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.